Welcome back to Mystery Garage. On this week's episode, I've been thinking about it for a couple weeks. I believe that I've sold myself out to the benefit of YouTube, and in this episode, I'll explain why. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Mystery Garage. So in the intro, I explained that I believe, last couple weeks that I've really been considering, I believe I sold myself out to the benefit of YouTube, and I thought I would quickly explain why. When I first started this project, back in the early episodes, I would say episode 1 or episode 2, I described that I wanted to build a car for me, a car that I wanted to have, when I was 17, 18, that sort of thing. And I think the issue comes from, I really want to develop the channel and grow the channel, and I've had a ton of positive comments and feedback and a ton of interest in my VR6 build project. And just for the sake of argument, if you look at the viewership on my videos, the viewership of the episode where I walk through my VR6 car for the first time has 15-20 times the views of any other episode I've created on this channel. And early on, I really want to grow the channel. I want to do what I can to kind of benefit you guys and things that you want to see and stuff that you enjoy. But I think the issue comes from the fact that I really lost the plot and why I started this whole YouTube thing. I started this YouTube thing for fun, to do it for my own benefit. And I think I got a little bit lost in the fact that people were interested in seeing VR6 content. So I thought it'd be a great idea if I switched this car over to a VR6 build. Now the issue comes from the fact that that's not truly what I wanted to do. I already have a VR6 Rabbit, and so I don't really want to, having thought about it, I don't really want to have another one. Then I have 2 VR6 Rabbits, and I think essentially at the end of the day I'd end up selling one of them, just because why have 2? So in thinking about it, I'm going to go back or revert back to my original plan for this car and build the car for me. What I want to build is an ABF clone on carburetors. So how do I do that? Well, let's revive this old baby. Quite a few episodes ago, I started taking apart this 2-liter 16 valve. And, at that time, I decided I was going to build the ABF clone. And, that was about the same time that I came across a VR6 parts car that I thought would be great to switch the gears on this project and go VR6. But instead, like I said, I'm no longer selling myself out to the demand of YouTube. I'm going to build a car that I want to build. And what car is that? Is an ABF clone. So I think we'll pull this out of hiding, and I'll show you my 2-liter ABA motor I have stored away. And I think we'll pull that out and we'll start looking at that, start peeling that apart, and we'll start talking about what it takes to build to build an ABF clone. So let's get to work. Oh, sorry guys. So for those of you who've maybe don't know this motor or have joined the channel recently, this is a 2-liter 16 valve that back in the early episodes of this channel, I would say, probably 15 episodes ago, and I encourage you to look back and watch me tear this motor down. We talk about the condition of it and what's going on, at which point I wrap it up for storage because I was ready to start ordering some parts for this car. So I actually, before I actually ordered any parts, I came across the VR6 parts car, so I more or less stopped in my tracks as far as building the ABF. But I think it's time to reopen that can of worms and start getting back into it. But first and foremost, we will show you that ABA. I do want to personally apologize to anybody who was really excited by the fact that I was going to build another VR6 Mark 1. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to end up doing enough content of my other Mark 1 VR6, especially the fact that I want to rebuild the head and pull out the and swap out the valve guides, that kind of thing. So I think we're going to end up pulling the motor out of that car anyway. So we're going to kind of end up doing a reverse build of that car as I take it apart. So that's for future episodes, and I'm not going to get worried about that right now. But like I said, what I want to do is build this car for me. So where that starts us off, building that car back for me, is I want to build an ABF or 2-liter ABF clone motor on carburetors, Weber 45. So we're going to do that with this. Now we need quite a few parts from this motor. We're not actually going to be using this block, and I'll explain that in a little bit. We end up using an ABA block, which I'll go ahead and pull out pretty quick. But we do use a lot of components from this motor, as well as components from the ABA motor as well. So what you're doing virtually is you're taking the two motors and you're combining particular parts. I will need to source a set of ABF pistons because they're a higher compression. I'm going for about 11:1, give or take, is where we're going to end up being on this motor. It will be an ABA bottom end with a 2-liter 16-valve head on Weber 45 carburetors with a header and all kinds of goodies. We'll probably end up doing cams and all that kind of thing on it as well. So without further ado, let's get to work on this car, unwrapping it, and then we'll go and grab that 2-liter ABA and bring it into the shop. Actually, rather than unwrapping the motor first, because there's no point in doing that right now, I thought I'd go out to the Volkswagen shed and show you where I'm storing that ABA currently. Just a little bit of project updates. Everybody does see the truck sitting and waiting. 1.8T motor for that truck sitting in this car right here. Here's that VR6 I was talking about for the Red Rabbit. I was going to be using this engine, drivetrain, wiring, that sort of thing to convert over to the Red Rabbit to a VR6, and I wanted to stick with the original idea of that build and maybe put that VR6 on carbs, but to be honest with myself, that's not what I want to do. That's what I thought you guys would want to see. But again, sitting over it with a couple weeks, thinking about it and really kind of being in turmoil about what I should be doing. Should I be building the channel for the content that you guys want to see, or building the channel for what I really want to do with my cars? And at the end of the day, I went back to why I started this channel, was to do what I want to do. So again, I apologize for anybody who wanted to see this engine repurposed into that Mk1, but I will use this for either a later date project, or I will end up selling most of these parts off. That leads me to one of the early cars we saw on this channel that I bought back, that I had a long time ago. When I bought it back, it came with an ABA. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so I've removed the hood now, and you can see this is where the ABA sits. Now, when I first sold this car off when I was working on it, this ABA wasn't part of the sell-off. The owner who ended up buying it from me ended up collecting this ABA and just placing it in the car. There's no wiring for it set up or anything. It's really not bolted in other than two motor mounts. It's got the one on the trans and the one on the other side of the engine block, but it's really just resting there for a future date. So I'm just going to quickly pull it out and bring it into the garage. So let's do that. Right, the ABA is in the shop. Here it is. So it's not entirely fully complete, but it's got most of the stuff I need. It's missing the alternator and that kind of thing, so we'll have to source that, because doing an ABF clone, you want to try and keep a lot of the serpentine accessories, because it makes the swap a lot cleaner and looks pretty neat. So and it works really well. Anyway, so what we got here is the basis for the ABF build. You take some parts from that, throw it in here, some new pistons. All right, so what makes this motor so sought after? Well, it has something to do with, you know, the Volkswagen phenomena of always wanting to be, if you're a North American guy, you want your car to be as Euro as possible. If you're European, you want your car to be North American as possible. So it's one of those things. The ABF for us in North America was never an option. It came in the Euro spec Mark IIIs. So for us American guys, it's something that we always kind of want to do, have something a little more Euro. So it's kind of a build that a lot of people like to try and do. We can use some parts from our North American cars and build this ABF clone. That's why I call it a clone. There's a couple things to note. The 9A, which is the 2-liter 16 valve, came about 134 give or take horsepower, and the ABF, as European advertised, is about 150 range. It's got a little bit of higher compression pistons. It has a taller deck block, so you get some few things there. If you just strictly take the 2-liter ABA, take the head off and put a 16 valve head on it, you're going to have about 8-to-1 compression, or 8.5-to-1 give or take. So it's not all that great for doing an NA type build, but if you do take the 9A pistons out of that block and put it into the ABA, you'll be at about 9-to-1 compression. So again, a little bit more compression, but not super ideal for running NA. If you were to boost it, that's a fabulous combination. But for me, I want to run carbs, keep it NA, so I want to increase the compression. So we're going to find some pistons that are about 11-to-1 if I can source them. So basically, there's some combination of parts that we'll have to break down in future episodes and talk about what's necessary. But a quick rundown, and I'll show you right now. All right, so in a nutshell, we're going to be taking the head that's no longer on this motor and slapping it on this one. We're going to take the ABA head off of this motor and basically junk it. I'll probably sell it for parts, to be honest. Things that are different about the engine, well, the distributor on an ABA motor is driven, is a block-mounted distributor. On a 16 valve, it's on the side of the head, as you saw in my teardown. So a couple things. One, this distributor drives the oil pump, so you have to change some parts inside. You got to change the oil pump to being a 16 valve oil pump in this block to make sure that it's driven properly. Other things that are a little bit different, well, you're going to run into the situation where the intermediate shaft, as you can see here, this is the intermediate shaft. The pulley is on a 2-liter ABA, or the belt is wider on a 16 valve. So this pulley isn't wide enough. That's what we're going to use. You can see the difference here. We're going to use this intermediate shaft pulley on this block. We're going to run the block off plate from this distributor. That block off setup right here will end up putting where that distributor is mounted, and a bunch of other stuff like that. So there's a lot of like inner part swapping when you get into the build, but essentially from what I know of this motor coming with this car, it's a relatively low kilometer engine. I think he told me it was about 150 to 175 range. I hope he's telling me the truth, but we're going to take this motor apart in a future episode and be able to take a look at it and figure out where we stand. But between the combinations of these two engines, all I really need that I don't have is pistons and rings. We're obviously going to check the main bearings as well as the rod bearings in the ABA to make sure everything's good to go. But if it is a relatively low-K car for its age, it should be okay, and we'll take a look at it and see how much we really have to do. We're going to be looking for cross-hatching in the block as well. Hopefully that's all there. So all in all, we're resurrecting the car and the concept that I originally wanted for this build. Like I said in the beginning of this episode, I feel like I sold myself out, my soul out for YouTube to try and attract or interest people who are interested in VR6 swapping to the channel. But at the end of the day, why I started this channel was for myself, was to build the car I wanted to build. So at the end of the day, that's exactly what we're going to do here. So, taking a look at the car, summarizing where we left off, in a previous episode, I talked about, me needing to make decisions of, what I'm going to keep as far as holes and where everything is going, what I'm doing for bracketry. I said I was going to take some time and think about it and order some parts to help move this project along. Well, that's exactly where I had the moment in time of deciding that doing a VR6 swap wasn't what I truly wanted to do. I was going to do it for the benefit, like I said, of people who are interested in this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, my enthusiasm for cleaning up this bay and really making it spotless didn't quite work with the VR6 engine. Doing an ABA build, and you'll see on carbs, this engine will be so simple. The only wiring this engine would then need is the alternator powering and battery wiring and that sort of thing, as well as the ignition. Other than that, everything carbureted will be very simple, no wiring. It'll keep the engine looking very clean. That being said, so will then the engine bay. The routing for the fuel lines is very simple. Routing for the wiring is basically next to nothing. So a lot of the wiring for the headlights and that sort of stuff, I will actually do a wire tuck. And so in the wire tuck, there is, which is why I left it, there's this particular hole which goes into the cabin. I'll probably drill that out a little larger, and then we'll run the wiring for the front end up the front. And you can see right here, let's focus on that a bit. You can see right here the spot welds from factory. If you drill in here, it will actually chase your wiring inside of the front core support. And then you can come out whatever hole you want in the core support to make the wiring possible for the headlights and that sort of thing without actually seeing any wiring. So instead of, let me just show you. So instead of running the front end wiring out of these two holes, we'll be doing a wire chase from this hole up around and into the core support from the side here, and then coming out the holes of wherever necessary, especially for things like the alternator wires and stuff. They can come out a little bit over here and go right up to the alternator. So when you're looking at the engine bay, you don't have any of the busyness. So essentially, other than what will I need? I'll need heater corks. I'm going to run that. I'll need that hole because that's the steering. That's the brake booster. You got clutch there, which I'll still need, I believe. I haven't decided whether I want to go hydro clutch on this or not, based on transmission choice. I will need the throttle wire, which will be right there. I'll probably cover up most of those. I still will run my wiper motors, so I'll need one of those holes at least, and these holes here can be covered in and filled up. Anything bracketry related can all be deleted. This bracket, that bracket, all the little brackets on the back, I'll end up tucking the brake lines underneath this line right here to ensure that you can't see most of it. And really get to work cleaning up this bay. We'll delete this, which is for the wiper or the washer fluid. All that stuff will get deleted. This engine, when it's in its place, will be a very simple, clean build. I will be keeping, like I said in the previous episode, I will be keeping the rain tray because I do want to make sure it's fresh air only. But this bay will be super, super simplified in a future episode. So thank you very much, girls and boys. I hope you're just as excited as I am now that I've laid everything out and made this change to the build. It has me more enthusiastic than ever. I got the parts laying on my floor. It's easier for me to see it through now because I know, what I'm keeping in the engine bay, what I'm not. It's what I promised you a couple episodes ago, that I would come up with a final decision of where this project's going to go and what in the engine bay we're going to keep, what we're not going to keep. It really helps drive home the choices of the build and what, in the engine bay. Fuel lines is simple, brake lines is simple, cooling system is simple, and it's going carbureted, so wiring is simplified. All those decisions, all the choices are made by choosing the power plant you're going to use and knowing the route you're going to take. So for this car, 2-liter ABF, and we're going to do it on carbs, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned to future episodes when we really start to tackle this sort of stuff. I think I'm going to move actually to an engine tear down of the 2-liter ABA, as well as a quick parts list of what we're going to need to pick up to continue this episode moving ahead. And then what we're going to do is place an order for those parts. And while we're waiting for those things to arrive, obviously with COVID, things are a little bit slower. What we're going to do is we're going to start tackling more in the chassis. Next episode, I think I want to paint the floor in the car, as well as drop the tank and start doing some undercoating underneath the car to really get the chassis ready to start adding parts to it. Once we build more of the engine, we'll start tackling the engine bay and getting a lot of stuff cleaned up and dressed up in there. and then we can continue to work on getting that engine placed in the engine bay. So for now, guys, thank you very much for following along this episode. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to see what you guys say in the comments, but until next time, take care.